So, you've probably seen the headlines. India's economy has officially crossed the $4 trillion mark. It's a massive, attention-grabbing number. But today, we're going to go deeper. We're going to get into the real story behind that number and what it means for India's development journey. Okay, let's just start with the number itself. $4 trillion. That's a 4 with 12 zeros after it. Just let that sink in. It puts India in a very exclusive club of global economic heavyweights. But what does a number that big actually tell us about a country?
And that, right there, is the central question of this whole explainer. I mean, having a gigantic economy is one thing, but how does that wealth actually translate to the well-being of its 1.4 billion people? Is India a developed nation? Well, the answer, it's a lot more complicated than you might think.
So here's how we're going to break it all down. First, we'll look at the big milestone itself. Then, we'll put the national economy side by side with individual prosperity. After that, we'll dive into the workforce, look beyond just economics to human development, and finally, talk about the path forward. Now, to get a real handle on this, we're going to compare India's journey with two other countries, Japan and Poland. Now, I know, they're all at very different stages, but trust me, this comparison gives us a fantastic lens to see just how much progress India has made and also how far it still has to go.
This quote just perfectly sums up what we're talking about. It's really a story of two sides of the same coin. We have to celebrate the absolutely incredible achievements while also being really clear-eyed about the challenges that are still there.
All right, let's get into the nitty-gritty, the core economic data, because this is where the story gets really interesting. This is where we see the contrast between the wealth of the nation and the wealth of the individual.
Okay, so look at this. The contrast is just wow. On the left, you see India's total GDP. It has absolutely exploded. We're talking nearly a 9-fold increase in 25 years. It's on track to blow past Japan's. But then, you look at the chart on the right. That tells a totally different story. Yes, GDP per person has also grown impressively, more than 6 times over, but it started from such a low base that it's still way behind developed nations.
And this brings us to where India is classified today. According to the World Bank, it's a lower middle-income economy. With an income per person of around $2,800, it needs to climb past that $4,500 mark to get to the next level. That's the next big hurdle in its development path.
So, if the overall economy is huge, but individual income is still on the lower side, it begs the question, what are people actually doing for work? This gets us to a really key idea in economics called structural transformation. It's basically the historic shift of a country's workers moving from farms to factories and then to offices.
And this chart tells that story perfectly. You can see the share of people working in agriculture has dropped a lot, which is a classic sign of development. But it's still at over 43%. That's incredibly high when you compare it to Poland or Japan, where it's under 8%. This means there's this massive pool of people who still need to move into jobs that pay more.
Now, the industrial sector, factories and manufacturing, it's absorbing some of that workforce. It's up to about 25%. And that's solid progress. But to really kickstart that next big leap in development, a lot of economists argue this number needs to be way higher. Just for perspective, during its manufacturing boom, China had over 32% of its workforce in industry. India's just not there yet.
And what about the services sector? I mean, this is the engine of most developed economies today. In Japan and Poland, it employs over 60% of all workers. In India, it's less than a third. So this shows a huge gap, for sure, but you could also see it as a massive opportunity for future growth. Economic growth is obviously crucial, but true development is about way more than just money. It's about quality of life. So let's zoom out a bit and look at some key measures of human development.
This chart, right here, is a real eye-opener. It shows the percentage of people who have formal, salary jobs. A steady paycheck, benefits, that kind of thing. In Japan and Poland, that's over 80% of the workforce. In India, it's just under 24%. That means more than 3/4 of the entire workforce is in the informal sector, often dealing with a ton of uncertainty. Formalizing the economy is just a monumental task.
But here we see a story of just incredible progress. Take a look at the college enrollment rate. Since 1995, India's rate has jumped nearly 6 times over, from just 5.5% to almost 33% today. Expanding access to education like this is absolutely critical for building a modern, skilled economy.
And this didn't just happen overnight. This timeline really puts it all into perspective.
Right after independence, less than 1 in 5 Indians could read and write. Today, that number is over 80%. It's been a long, steady climb, and it's really a testament to decades and decades of hard work.
The improvements in health have been just as amazing. In the last 25 years alone, India has added almost 10 years to its average life expectancy, which is now over 70. All this progress is captured in something called the Human Development Index, or HDI. It basically combines health, education, and income into one score. And on that front, India has successfully jumped from the low to the medium human development category. That's a huge deal.
So, where does this all leave us? We've seen the giant economic numbers, and we've seen the human-level data. Let's bring the two sides of India's stories together and see what the path forward looks like.
This is really the dual reality of India today. On one hand, you have an undeniable economic superpower, a $4 trillion GDP that has grown at a jaw-dropping pace. But on the other hand, you have a country that's still on a long development journey, grappling with low income per person, a massive informal workforce, and some serious gaps in social indicators that still need to be closed.
And this leaves us with one final and probably the most important question. The real challenge isn't about picking one of these stories over the other, it's about bridging the gap between them. As India's economy keeps soaring, what is the single biggest hurdle it has to clear to make sure that powerful economic engine truly lifts up all 1.4 billion of its people? That right there is the defining question for India's next chapter.